Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Bea Kyle, and welcome to Bea's Table Talk. It's the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce podcast. I'm your host, Bea Kyle, President and CEO, and given our current stay-at-home order due to COVID-19, our podcast is via Zoom, which is even more fun because you get to watch as well. And I've invited my sidekick with the official title of co-host, Tom Whaley of the St. Paul Saints. Hi, Tom.
Bea, how are you doing this morning? This really is a table talk. This is like my kitchen table talk at 6:30. This is kind of what I look like at 6:30. Even though we're not doing this at 6:30 a.m., this is what I look like. So it's a real table talk.
Well, welcome. We love it. And we have a more beautiful face to introduce. This is Melissa. Please, Melissa, would you introduce yourself and just say hey?
Yeah. Hi, Melissa Dessart. I am, the co-founder of Creator Space, which is a creativity center in Coffee House right in Lower Town, St. Paul. We've been around kind of just a short amount of time and probably the history of a lot of businesses in St. Paul, but we're thrilled to be part of the call today.
Fabulous. So you made the transition from corporate to this creative enterprise. Tell us a little bit about where you were and how has that transition been for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll kind of take a way step back. So I was a dance major and business major in college. And so I've always kind of been torn between the importance of, running and building important businesses that really help kind of set the pace for culturally what's important. But then also I have a love for art, for creativity. Always been somebody that has felt that nurturing my own creative spirit is such an important part of my life. So I started with a passion in movement and dance, was a dance major in college, but then also knew I needed a backup plan like a lot of creatives do. So I also majored in business. And then I also love understanding behavior in the mind. So I also have a minor in psychology. So kind of a whole bunch of stuff mixed together. Anyway, long story short, I was pursuing a dance career, but then ended up meeting the love of my life. And so in order to have a, productive, dance career, it's really hard to have a family. So I chose to put kind of that creative career on hold. And then really got into the business side of things. I started my career at Target Corporation. So I got to live a little bit in both worlds, focused on product development. I was a buyer, business analyst. I was there for about 12 years. I was very fortunate to be able to work on projects that were new and innovative, kind of new startups for the company, which was great. And then I moved into Capella University, where I oversaw the School of Education for about 8 years, had a great dean that I worked with, many deans actually. And so I got to, live in the education world for a little bit as well. But all while I was doing that, I was able to really, tap into creativity and innovation, to really bring to the forefront what I thought was needed for the industry to make change. But in all of that time, just to kind of close up that part of my life, I was getting more and more, I would say, disheartened in how creatives were valued. And it's not that the organization set out to devalue creatives and innovation. It was actually quite the opposite. But what was happening is there wasn't enough emphasis, I think, to put towards enabling and creating the conditions for creativity to thrive. And so I just kind of had gotten to a point where I was super frustrated, was doing a lot of journaling, and the journaling was really more frustration. It was anger. It was if only the world could look like this instead, as corny as that sounded. So it all kind of culminated into this time of my life where I was frustrated, I was angry, I was not happy with kind of where things were moving. And as somebody that very rarely plays victim to those types of things, I said, okay, Melissa, what are you going to do about it? Right? So if you're frustrated and angry about the situation, then do something. And then this is where it gets a little corny, but it's the advice of a friend. She said, okay, Melissa, you've been frustrated, so just go take a day off, take some time for yourself, and just try to clear your head. And so I go to this little local coffee house. I've got my journals, I've got my laptop, I've got my coffee, and I'm sitting there and I'm reading these journals, and I'm like, none of it makes sense. It's not like I had a business plan in there. It really not even ideas. It was more things that I was frustrated with. And as I'm reading all of it, this is where it gets super corny. I put my elbows on the table and my hands up to my head, and I said, God, if I could just create space in my head to think. And as soon as I said those words, silly as it sounds, kind of the idea of Creator Space was born. And I sat and I wrote the concept of Creator Space over 45 minutes with the coffee, tears kind of pouring out of my eyes. And that was really the beginning of what you see today at Creator Space. That set off a very rapid ideation phase. It was pretty much 1 year to the date from when the idea of Creator Space came to when we started the renovation of the building. And so that means building business plans. That means, finding financing, cultivating the idea into, what it is, bringing on people to help me build it. So it was pretty rapid pace. But that's kind of how Creator Space was born.
Melissa, this is Tom, and to sort of follow up, I'm going to ask you to travel to the left side of your brain.
Yeah.
On this one. Where did you, why the place that you decided to be where you are? You're in Lower Town, St. Paul. There are a lot of places around the Twin Cities where you could have put it. What led to that specific location? I mean, I know that's probably one of the bigger decisions you make when you're opening a business. Where am I going to do this? And so why where you are?
Yeah, that's a great question. So
Next, very close neighbors to St. Paul Saints.
Why where you are? Is that all right, Dee? I don't know.
That's appropriate. Slightly awkward, but that's appropriate.
Okay.
Great question. So I would say, we looked in all different areas. We started looking in Minneapolis. We also, at the same time, were looking in St. Paul. And honestly, with the amount of space that we were in need of for this concept, we really needed to weigh the options of how much can we afford? Because I'll tell you guys, like, one of the things that went into our decision making is that we knew this was such a new concept. It's not done out there. I have yet to find something which either says I'm brilliant or I'm crazy. Either, take your pick. And through our little roller coaster, people would probably be on both sides of the fence. Anyway, but to answer your question, it kind of found us, as silly as that sounded. We were looking at a place in Minneapolis. It was way out of our price range because we knew we had to buy the building. That was the only way where we could be able to do what we knew needed to be done. It was a brand new concept. Not a lot of people would invest in completely relaying their space in a concept like ours, because if it doesn't work, then what are they going to do with a space that's music and dance and art space and co-working business space? It was such a diverse collection of spaces that would be hard to turn it into something that they could retenant, I guess.
Mhm.
So we ended up finding the place we had and here again, I can get into a long story, but we had a place about a mile and a half north, still in St. Paul, that we had a purchase agreement on. That fell through. So my husband and I, after that fell through, we were literally driving through Lower Town, and we see this big paper handwritten sign that said "building for sale." And I kind of fell in love with it. I mean, it's right in the heart of Lower Town. It's, right in kind of the core area. Right on the spot, we call up Janae Brooks. You guys are very familiar with the Brooks, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she said, well, do you want to see it? I'm available now. So we go and see the building and fell in love. And if you go on our website, you'll see some before and after pictures. So it was a big, massive space with so much potential. But oh boy, was it a diamond in the rough. It was really in rough shape.
Did you do much? I'm curious. Did you do much research sort of into the neighborhood? So you found the space you like. Physically, it works.
Yep.
But I'm guessing the environment around it goes into the equation as well. So you've got to have both those things. You have to have the physical place to do it, and then also the area around it has to be receptive ultimately to what you're doing. So how did maybe talk about that a little bit? What were some of the considerations you looked for in a neighborhood?
So a couple things with that. So part of my background at both Capella and Target was a tremendous amount of research, right? So a lot went into building the business plan, which meant a third party assessment of, what are the market conditions? What's the demographic? And I would say, I had done some significant insight in building the business plan, a lot of research in, what is coffee shop? What's the market in the coffee shop in the Lower Town area? What are the demographics? What's the median income level? What is the growth rate as far as population size in St. Paul? All of those conditions and kind of the trending that was happening in Lower Town all showed that this would be a great location. So we looked at, and so I had done the analysis, and then we actually hired a third party consultant to also help us do a little bit of the analysis. And interesting enough, his analysis came back even higher probability of success than I had originally put together here. So that answers.
Okay.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
So we had the good fortune of being part of your ribbon cutting and grand opening, and it's been over 2 years now. I can't even believe it's been that long. I'm thinking it was last year, and then it's been 2 years ago. Whew, time passes.
Yeah.
I know you had a bit of a bumpy start, but now you're going strong. So can you tell us about that transition? What did you learn as you got started?
Well, be no different than any startup, right? You have to kind of be prepared for the ride, right? And the ride, the ups and downs, and honestly, more importantly, the ability to be nimble and change as you learn more. And so I like to say the first 8 months that we were in business, we probably went through about 10 years worth of insights and learnings. Everything from, what works in a membership type of a model, because it's not like we started one business with Creator Space. We have a coffee shop, we have a cafe, we have a gallery and a marketplace, we have a co-working space, and then we have and then classes. We also do classes. So we had many different types of revenue streams all being done kind of at the same time. Small team to make it happen. Anyway, our learnings. Well, through that time, the number one thing I would say that we learned is how important community is, and actually bringing people in to understand what their needs are. We were not meeting the needs of creative when we first opened. Even though we had a tremendous amount of space, we had, more tools and supplies than you could ever imagine, but we didn't necessarily understand what their needs were. And so that was one of the big failures the first time we were open. The other thing is I overstaffed it. I had more people than needed to actually deliver on the promise. The other thing that we realized is that we need to be here to enable creatives to be successful, not to do the work for them. So there were all these things that we learned first time around. And I'll be honest, I mean, we were open, closed the door on December 8th of 2018, one of the hardest days professionally. I knew it wasn't over, even though I wasn't sure where we were going to get cash flow, but I knew it wasn't over. And the advice I would give to any, new entrepreneur is you just got to keep going. So we closed the doors. I probably spent the first month after winding down the business, just doing meditation, tremendous amount of meditation, just to clear my head so that I could really start to have a clear head to look at what went wrong, to understand what needed to be done differently, and then also to be open to possibilities. So during that closure, I met with so many different people to try to understand what is it that they would be in need of? What are we really trying to solve? What are we trying to provide and offer through Creator Space? And then 4 months later, we reopened. And I'll be honest with you guys, we didn't reopen because we discovered what the new business model needed to be. We reopened because we had a commitment to this really large organization called NCECA, and that it was a ceramic conference that was in the Twin Cities, and we had the two most prominent art organizations that were going to be exhibiting in our space. And so I had to open. Where we then ended up having, I think, 2,000 people come through our space in a matter of 4 days just to see.
Desperation can be a great motivator. It's really, when you're out of options, that's not a bad place to be.
Yeah. So we reopened. We had a new membership model that we had created. I had really no staff, myself and a few others. And then over the course of probably 2 months, we relaunched membership programs. I would say we were very aware, present in the moment to really understand how we need to reshape the business. What are the different types of offerings we need to provide? How do we need to evolve? And I'll use one example that I'm actually pretty proud of. So one of the things that we realized with the first time around is that we had a membership model where people could use the space, but we didn't necessarily provide them the opportunity to understand how to use the space, as silly as that sounds. So we had a ton of classes the first time around, but the classes were an added price over and above the memberships. So this time around, we said, we can't do that. We have to help people to just begin, because that's our motto. So we launched all these just begin painting classes, pottery classes, entrepreneurship classes, creative writing classes. And those were really the heart of what helped us to rebuild the business. People could come in, they could try out a painting class, they could try out a pottery class. It was the thing they needed to help them begin to participate. And then the other thing that we discovered is that creatives needed a space to be able to incubate their ideas. So they needed to have a classroom space, or they needed to have an event space. And so we redid our membership programs that would allow them to use the space kind of where they're at in the incubation process. So I would have members that have, a 10-person event, all the way up to people that needed a 100-person event. And so we could do that, and we could be nimble, and we could build membership programs that really aligned to how much and how frequent they needed to use the space. So we really became an incubator for creatives, is what I
Talk a little bit, if you could, for a second. To your point earlier about your business and your dance background, I played drums in a rock band for 10 years.
Awesome.
Pretty heavy. And I also went to law school, so I'm afflicted with the same disease. It's right, left brain. You should hear the conversations, and I'm sure you have in your own head about what goes on.
Yeah.
But I know in the band situation, the drummer doesn't always see eye to eye with the guitar player, and they look at things completely differently. So what do you explain maybe some of the interplay you've run into, because you have a lot of different creatives in the space. I mean, I'm sure there's times where the potters don't get along with the writers and they got issues. So how do you manage that? Because let's face it, artists are probably some of the most, I won't say egotistical, but they're egoistical. How do you manage that?
Okay, so that's a really good question. I would say first time around, we ran into that much more than the second time around. And one of the other elements that I haven't talked about at Creator Space is that we have a very strong healing and intuitive arts program here as well. So we have a space that's all dedicated to meditation, program that's built around intuitive kind of cultivation and intuitive nurturing. And so we have a very strong yoga, meditation practice here as well. We have probably the most well-used space in our entire space is our Salt Cave, which is a meditation space. So we've created this environment here, and as silly as it sounds, where people can feel comfortable coming face to face with their own personal life lessons. So I would say probably a lot of the personality conflicts that you might see with other artists, especially when you're working in collaboration, a lot of that is because people are dealing with their own personal stuff, right? It's the, and I'll use mine. Patience is my number one challenge in this lifetime, is trying to navigate my own internal patience traits, I guess. So to answer your question, we're not necessarily doing anything intentionally, with the exception of creating conditions for community to come together to talk through things or have resources for individuals to work through their own shit, right? Because we all have our
say
stuff.
that this is a podcast. We can use bad words.
Can we?
Awesome. Because it just cuts to the chase, really, when we get down to it. So
Right.
It's okay.
Exactly.
Right, B? Aren't we good? This thing ain't G-rated, is it?
We are safe.
Nice. All
It's
right.
a safe space.
All right.
Exactly.
Well, and actually the timing of our conversation and what you're talking about is the timeliness of this is really quite good, because we've got the art crawl coming up. Can you tell us about the art crawl? How long has it been? How are you involved in that?
We so the Art Collective obviously has been around for a very long time, and I would say the Art Collective and the creative community that has been in Lower Town is really the ones that helped develop Lower Town's brand as being a creative mecca, right? In an artist community. And so they've had a rich and long history of supporting artists and providing opportunities for artists. And the Art Crawl is one of those. And I would say they're going through their own, evolution, kind of as they're trying to reassess what the creative community is in need of. So we're big supporters of the Art Crawl. Actually, our original opening date back in 2018 was the Art Crawl. So that was our big grand opening, or wide opening, whatever you want to call it, which was pretty funny because we were still putting paint on the walls as artists were coming in to set up their booths. But anyway, so the Art Crawl is a really important event. for St. Paul and Lower Town, and it's really disappointing and saddening that we're not going to have it this year to support. But I know they're doing some things virtually to support and make sure to build the awareness. And so please, people, go and check out the art, even if it is done virtually. You can purchase online, whatever you can do to really support this community.
Melissa, what since you have been on both sides of the fence, you mentioned Target and Capella. As far as I'm aware, and I'm not aware specifically with the case of Capella, but I know Target's a supporter of the arts. How do you see that interplay? How can businesses that have a desire to support the arts see the value in it? What are some things you've seen in your career where they maybe ones that businesses that do a particularly good job of it, or maybe some of the things that you think that you've seen of, boy, it would be great if artists could get this kind of support? Because in my experience, we've been a supporter of the Art Crawl too. There's a significant degree of, I would call it, skepticism on both sides in terms of when I'm talking to business side or a creative side. They don't quite know the other, and that sometimes when you don't know something, you're a little fearful of it. And I certainly have seen that. There's some of the business folks like, oh, the crazy artists, and the artists are like, oh, those cold bloodless capitalists. So how can a business that's desirous of being involved, what are maybe a couple of good things they can do to get involved and support?
Yeah, well, I think before I answer that directly, what I have seen here again in my 20 years on the business side, and then obviously overseeing and running creator space, the biggest value of a creative is to really see diverse thinking. We talk a lot about diversity, and we've kind of brought it to look like more of a ethnic type of definition. But I think diversity is really more in the way that you think, in the way that you behave. And so to me, the biggest value for a business to partner with the creative community is really to bring in diverse thinking. So, if I had it my way, like one of my goals would be is how do I start to bridge some type of a working relationship where businesses are actually seeking the knowledge and insight of a creative. I mean, creatives have the ability to see things in such a different way. They can see connections, they can see insights that people that live on the inside of a business are hard pressed to find sometimes. Even the most creative people within Target or within Capella, I was always just so blown away at the lack of true creativity that we embrace. And part of the reason for that, I believe, is because it comes with that kookiness, right? I mean, you talk about that. Creatives sometimes look a little different. They might act a little different. Sometimes they say things that make us uncomfortable, but that's the whole point, right? It's when you surround yourself with very different thinkers, that's when ideas come. That's when solution comes. So in my mind, I would love to see more of an intersection on how the business community is actually inviting creatives in to help them tackle some of the most biggest challenges that they have. I mean, of course, you can support artists by hanging their paintings on the wall. I mean, stop buying all of the artwork from these big boxes and support your local creatives. I mean, that's an easy no-brainer way. All of your walls should be filled with original art. Great, easy. That's one way. But I think if you really want to understand the value of the creative economy, because I know that's one of the other thing we're going to talk about a little bit is the creative economy. And the creative economy is all about putting value on an individual's creative thought. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, there is an opportunity, and especially as we're working through the recovery of this pandemic, bringing creatives together into the conversation around how do we need to evolve? How do we need to change? How do we need to see things a little bit differently? A creative's going to help you do that.
So I have one final question for you, and it speaks to your comment about diversity. So we're working to really elevate and support the cultural destination areas in St. Paul in the arts, culture, recreation, entertainment space. And you hear the phrase POCI, or the initials POCI within the context of the diverse creative community. Can you educate us on what that means and the impact here?
Can you tell me what that stands for? PCOI?
POCI, the Professionals of Color. And so speak to the diversity of the community. So we've got the cultural destination areas are just the heartbeat of one expression of that heartbeat, right, out in the marketplace and bringing the diverse community. Are you seeing that as well? Not only in the diversity of thought, but are you seeing in it the diversity of the people that you're working with as well within the art space?
Oh, yes. I would say hands down. I have made a conscious effort to not tally it up, right? Not to quantify the diversity that we have within our space. And some people may criticize me for doing that, but I would say what's been magical about Creator Space is organically we are seeing a diversity in color, in ethnic background, in economic situations, education levels, age. You see when you don't necessarily put a tremendous amount of intention around setting out to have a certain number, and you just create the conditions for everybody to thrive, organically and naturally, the community is going to come together.
Marvelous.
And I would say what's been somewhat easy for us is that St. Paul is a very diverse community.
Right.
In ethnic background, and like I said, socioeconomic and education level and income level. And so we just open the doors and provide everybody equal opportunity to come in and participate. So naturally, we are becoming a realistic sample of the broader St. Paul community. And I couldn't be more proud of that.
That's marvelous. So thank you for taking your time with us. To all of the listeners and watchers, the virtual Art Crawl this weekend and supporting the Professionals of Color and Indigenous community and Creator Space. And thank you for taking the time, and we look forward to doing more of these kinds of programs in the future.
Yeah, thanks.
So everybody have a great day.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.